Jake and TD wrapping up your Black Friday here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, Teron Davenport with you until 7 p.m. It's been a fun day here on the station. Lots of shows, Preds game, and we wrap it up as we get you ready for the rest of your football weekend. Already tons of football been played this week. We'll recap that in just a second. But TD, only our third show doing this where we're coming off of a Titans victory. Titans get the win on Sunday in Houston. Felt like it was much needed for their confidence and maybe is the turning point for this season as we saw Will Levis look good. We saw the defense make some plays and the Titans made enough plays down the stretch to get a big win over a division rival.
Yeah, it was a big win for them. And like you said, over a division rival. And it's one of those type of games where it really can launch your season into a successful one. Now, how do we define success? There's multiple ways to do that. But I think this was a very big confidence building win for them. And it goes from Will Levis to Devondre Sweat to Jeffrey Simmons, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., every player on that team, you name it. It was a big confidence booster for them. And of course, anytime you have the controlling owner in the locker room with tears in her eyes giving the speech, you know you did something right.
Yeah, the wins over Houston for sure always mean a lot more to Amy Adams-Strunk and her family. Big win for the Titans, get their third win of the season. We'll recap that more coming up in the next segment. We are live tonight, so if you do want to get in on the conversation, you can text us 615-737-1025. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. TD, a fun couple days of football. We had the 3 games yesterday across the NFL. Let's start with the Bears and Lions game. Matt Eberflus has since been relieved of his duties. That may have been some of the worst clock management I've ever seen. And we see some bad clock management across college football and the NFL throughout the season, but 30 seconds on the clock, you take a sack, you have a timeout, it's third down and long. Seems like it would be common sense and pretty much a no-brainer to call the timeout. Instead, they let the clock run out, throw a deep ball, zeros on the clock as it hits the ground. You lose the game.
Yeah, I don't get it. I was watching the game and I'm like, because I wasn't sure if they had a timeout or left. So I just said, well, you know what, spike it. You know, at the very least, do that. And it just was one of those things where he threw the deep pass, and I'm like, they really just let the time tick
What
off
are
the
you
clock.
doing?
And I turned to my lady's cousin. I said, you know, Corey, that's a fireable offense. You know what I mean? And he looked at me. I was like, yeah, he could get fired over this. And it just was one of those things because it piled up. And that was the dam, you know, the dam broke at that point.
Right. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think everybody kind of knew where it was headed with Matt Eberflus, but that was the final straw with him where you could not let him coach another game after that. And obviously, I thought it was strange. They let him talk to the media this morning over Zoom and then fired him. But Matt Eberflus, no longer the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Is he already the 4th head coach fired this year? With Dennis Allen, Robert Saleh. Was there one more? That might be it. It might just be those 3, but already some openings across the National Football League. Then today on Black Friday, we got Chiefs and Raiders, which, you know, on paper, you didn't think was going to be all that competitive, but those divisional games, they always find a way to be close down the stretch, and the Chiefs win their 14th straight one-score game. I mean, the jokes are being made about Patrick Mahomes and, you know, made a deal with the devil or something like that to win these games, but in field goal range, the Raiders false start. They don't blow the play dead, fumble the ball, and the Chiefs get on it. They take a knee. They win the game. That's the second time in a month that the Chiefs have somehow stolen victory from the jaws of defeat against a divisional opponent.
I don't know what to say. I'll say it this way, and I think, you know, they say, you know, sometimes the ball bounces your way and those types of things, but I feel like when you're playing well and when you've developed a culture, these things just tend to manage to happen in your favor. I don't know for sure what on earth the center was thinking, Aiden O'Connell was clearly looking to his left, I believe it was, and the ball is hiked and it hits him. And I don't know what they're thinking. Me personally, I probably wouldn't even have been in shotgun in that situation, but that's just me. Has done a great job of just making sure that everybody is just as opposed to being all frantic and hectic and
Yeah.
not knowing. They know what to do in these clutch situations.
Lions and Chiefs, the two best teams in the league by record, both find ways to win against teams that, at home, you probably think they should have taken care of, but, the good teams find a way to win those close games, even though they might have gotten some help down the stretch from their opponents, the Bears and Raiders, both aiding in the results of those games. But the Chiefs get a win. They still only have the one loss to the Bills on the season. Lions also just one loss on the year. Looks like those two could be the eventual top seeds to get the bye in their respective conferences. Jake and TD on this Friday evening, wrapping up the day and sending you into your football weekend. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Titans win in Houston back on Sunday. The Titans, man, we kind of saw a little bit of everything on Sunday. Some of the same problems that have cost the Titans games in the past, they reared their ugly heads. But for the first time this year, the Titans found a way to overcome them and get a win against Houston on Sunday. We'll talk about that next. Jake and TD, presented by Soul Nashville here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Jake and TD on this Friday evening with you up until 7 o'clock, talking football, getting you ready for the rest of this Thanksgiving weekend. Lots of great games, rivalry weekend in college football, and then, of course, a full slate of NFL games on Sunday. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport. Let's get back to the Titans here in this segment. And again, we are live today, so if you want to text or call 615-737-1025, we'd love to hear from you. Titans get a win in Houston on Sunday, third win of the season for Tennessee. And TD, I kind of teased it heading into the break. We saw the issues that have plagued the Titans all year. Special teams. You give up the long return that leads to a touchdown to start the game. Will Levis has a back-breaking mistake throwing the pick six that gives the Texans the lead in the second half. But they still were able to overcome those this time, which I think is an important step for this team that, hey, you can make some mistakes, but you have the ability to overcome it and still get a win on the road against a divisional opponent.
Yeah, that's a big thing. They showed that it doesn't all have to be perfect, which is something that we've seen with this team for quite some time, whereas everything has to go right and they'll win. That wasn't the case in that game. And as you said, the mistakes, I really thought the pick six that Levis threw, I thought that was going to break that team's back. I'm like, oh, this game is done. Because Reliance State, I keep saying Reliance Stadium, NRG Stadium was going crazy. And up until that point, like, it was pretty quiet in there. But Jimmy Ward stepped in front of that, and he took it back to the house. I just like the way that they bounced back. Now, it wasn't the very next series. It was a couple series later. Chig Okonkwo caught that, and shout out to Brian Callahan for dialing that play up, seeing the way teams have been playing Calvin Ridley, who, by the way, is on pace for 1,100 yards,
right,
which would be the most in the last 20 years by a Titans receiver. I told him about that, and he couldn't believe it. He could not believe it. So it's going to be cool seeing him go on that track. But knowing how teams are playing Calvin Ridley, he cleared it out. You had that crosser coming underneath. Okonkwo caught it, and he told me, he said, man, I saw a little bit of daylight, and I just said, I'm running to it. And that's exactly what he did. He put those get somewhere shoes on, and he was gone.
There was nobody in the same area code with him when he caught that pass. I mean, that's great play design. You got a guy wide open and allowed him to use his abilities to get down the field and score.
Yeah.
You mentioned Calvin Ridley with 11. I didn't even realize he was on track for 1,100 yards. I mentioned it on Force Company this morning, and I think the same goes for Calvin Ridley. I said it about Will Levis that if he had started this season with the past 3 games, I think Titans fans would feel like they found their guy. Calvin Ridley, if he had started the year with the last 5 or 6 games that he's had, I think people would say, wow, the Titans, they got a steal in free agency.
Absolutely. And so you look, and it's crazy to think, because you look at the Dolphins game where he had 1 catch for 5 yards. You look at the Packers game, 1 catch for 9 yards.
Right.
So you're including those games into his body of work, and he's still on pace for 1,100. He needs 374 or 376 to get 376 to have 1,000. He had 451 over the last few games, so he's definitely on pace. I think that averages, because I got a story posting, he's a part of their passing game opening up in the story, but I want to say it's around 90 yards a game he's averaging over that stretch, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. So yeah, he's definitely doing a thing. There's 6 games left, so I mean,
right.
He's more than likely going to pass it.
If he's even close to the pace he's been on, he'll pass that with ease. And I know first impressions are important. He came in and only had, like you said, 2 catches for 14 yards in a 2-game span. You're paying the guy close to $100 million. Fans might write a guy off after that and say, well, he wasn't worth it. He's a free agency bust. But you got to give some guys time. And I think it's great to see that the duo that I think Titans fans were most excited about coming into this year, the idea of having Will Levis and a bona fide number 1 receiver, is starting to come to fruition, and you're seeing those guys get on the same page.
Right, absolutely. It is starting to come to fruition and get on the same page. And Ridley, he didn't, pull any punches. Like, he admitted, hey, look, man, I couldn't catch the ball earlier this year, so I got on the jugs. He said my body wasn't feeling really good and responding the way I wanted it to, so I got more treatment and I found other ways. Shout out to him for seeing that things aren't going right and making the necessary adjustments. You got the lobster machine, which is the one that shoots the tennis balls. You got the jugs. He's on that. He set the tone. I mean, I had the story come out about 5 weeks ago. Brian Callahan sitting in his office at 7 a.m. He hears chook, chook. It's the jugs machine. It's Calvin Ridley out there with John Shaw, one of the assistant speed coaches, putting that work in. And you see now his pregame workout is different. I've posted videos where he's catching the tennis balls and doing things to work on the concentration. I love the Detroit game because I remember seeing him in the end zone. He was working on catching the ball over his shoulder like that. And it's not an easy catch to make. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did in that game. Now, of course, he tried to cut it back when he didn't need to. But, yeah, I mean, I really like the way he's starting to open up and evolve. And I know getting that 1K, it means a lot to him. So, and winning means more. But the 1K, he knows that will help this team win.
Right. And you hope that Will Levis can continue to show the same burst that we've seen the last 3 weeks, and then they get a full offseason together to continue to build this chemistry. With Will Levis, the wow throws are back, and it's 3 straight weeks. The Chargers game, it was maybe a little less. The 2 touchdowns to Calvin Ridley were both very good throws. The little shoulder pump, which I think has 100% success rate for Will Levis in his career so far.
When he's at his best.
And then the second one, yes, it was in garbage time, but he dropped it in the bucket over the shoulder on the left side of the end zone to Calvin Ridley late in that game.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Vikings game, you had the 98-yard touchdown to Nick Westbrook-Akine. And 2 of the throws to Ridley on Sunday, I think, might be the 2 best that he's had this season. I will never say that any of his throws are much better than the Falcons one to Nick Westbrook-Akine, his final touchdown in that game. He might have set the bar too high for himself with that. But the deep one to Calvin Ridley, guy in his face, hit him 60 yards downfield.
Yeah.
And then rolling to his left, throwing back across his body, hit Calvin Ridley in stride on the run.
And that was the 3rd and 11.
Right.
And it's fine. I brought that up to Callahan after the game. He couldn't remember because he was just like too much. He was like, you got to ask me tomorrow. But yeah, and that was the one where the blitzer came unblocked. He was left unblocked, and that was Levis' responsibility. And that is the growth, right, that you're seeing. That's the growth where it's like, okay, I know he's unblocked. I got to get out of harm's way and get this ball out. So, yeah, good point there. That one to Calvin Ridley, the deep one, that was 54 yards in the air. It was second most air yards last week, only to Lamar Jackson, who had a 57-yarder to Rashad Bateman.
The issue with Will Levis has been the sacks since he's come back. 20 sacks in 3 games since he's returned, which is that's an astronomical number.
Yeah.
And again, not all on him. You have to look at, the right tackle has been a turnstile at times this year. J.C. Latham did not have a good game on Sunday against Houston. So there are other factors, but the correlation of as soon as Will Levis gets back into the lineup, the sack numbers immediately spike again. There has to be some sort of fault on the quarterback for holding the ball a little bit too long.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, running into sacks, too. There are some times where – and, look, those – all right. I'm trying to think how I could say it without people saying, oh, well, he's just pumping sunshine. It's a progression, right? Because, okay, so previously what was happening is this dude had zero feel in the pocket, right?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
So he's just standing there, and all of a sudden, bam, he gets rocked, right? Now the progression is, okay, he feels it a little bit, so he is climbing the pocket or trying to manipulate and maneuver within the pocket. But the only problem is there are so many times where he's maneuvering and climbing into sacks. But there's a progression.
It's slow progress.
Yeah. So now the next thing is, okay, feel it, manipulate it, and don't manipulate it into the wrong place, and learn where to go. And it's just a slow progression. It has to get better. That's really the bottom line.
It's great to see the turnovers have been better. Again, the pick 6, it wasn't good on Sunday.
Bad read.
But you can live with it when you see all of the other stuff that he did. And I think you're starting – this has to be the most consistent 3-game stretch we've seen from Will Levis in his career. Because last year, yes, you saw the bursts in the Falcons game, the Steelers game, the Dolphins game, but there were games in between those where it just wasn't
very
there.
Average. Yeah.
But these last 3 games is probably the first 3-game stretch where I can look back and say, okay, I've seen it 3 weeks in a row of that's why people thought he might be a franchise quarterback. He's got to keep it going. There's still 6 games left in the season where, I don't know if he's proven it yet that he deserves to be the guy next year. I think he's getting there. He's getting closer, but he still has to show that this is not just a little flash in the pan off the injury, coming back and having a couple of good weeks in a row. He's got to show that he's sustained this consistency throughout the end of the season.
Absolutely. He has to be a more consistent player without a doubt. And that's something that we're looking to see if he could do, right? And he has to take hold of that job. I mean, this Titans team, they'll probably have a top 10 pick. What are they going to do with it?
Yep.
What are you going to do, Will Levis, to make sure that it's not a quarterback that they're picking? And I think that's what these next 6 games are all about. The thing I like about it is he's saying is he's not looking down. It's week by week. He said, "Okay, my eyes are on the Commanders this week, and we're going to look to win that game, and then just keep stacking them."
We'll talk about that game towards the end of the show as well. Titans heading up to our nation's capital, taking on the Washington Commanders this week. We'll also look at the defense coming up next. The defensive line had a very nice game against the Texans on Sunday. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you want to chime in, our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Again, we'll get into the defensive line and look ahead to the Commanders coming up next. Jake and TD presented by Soul Restaurants Nashville here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Jake and TD, presented by Soul Nashville, here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Hope everyone out there had a great Thanksgiving yesterday. We're wrapping up your Black Friday, sending you into what should be a really fun football weekend, rivalry weekend in college football. We'll spend a little bit of time on Tennessee and Vanderbilt at the end of the show. Big rivalry game with a lot of implications coming up tomorrow here in Nashville. But talking Titans here for now. Recapping the game in Houston over the weekend, Titans got the win over the Texans, and also looking ahead to Sunday's matchup in Washington as the Titans take on the Commanders. TD mentioned wanted to talk about the defensive line. T'Vondre Sweat, got to give him some props. Got his first ever NFL sack on Sunday. Jared's been saying, got to hit the quarterback. He hit the quarterback and got C.J. Stroud down in the second half of that game.
There's more to it than just hitting the quarterback. This dude makes impact plays, and I get it. It's easy to box score and say, hey, he's not making an impact, but watch the games. You could feel the impact of some of them. So, yeah, he did have the sack, right? And you look at that sack that he had. I mean, they had the little stunt going, and the guard, he tried to block him, and then it was just like Sweat just got tired of it and just threw him off him and went and got the quarterback. I think these are the things that you're going to start to see more and more of, because this tandem, like, they're coming alive. They're coming together and they're playing really well. And just like Denard Wilson said, the defense comes and goes as Jeffrey Simmons does. But don't get it twisted. A part of Jeffrey Simmons going has a lot to do with T'Vondre Sweat and what he's been able to do.
Yeah, and what impressed me most on that play is a man that big is not supposed to be able to change direction as fast as he did. I mean, C.J. Stroud is not a immobile core. He's not a statue back there.
Yep.
And T'Vondre Sweat was able to chase him down and make the play. Really impressed by T'Vondre Sweat. And you mentioned Big Jeff. He's really started to come along. I mean, we mentioned it with Will Levis and Calvin Ridley. Slow starts to the season, but quietly have worked their way back. Same with Jeffrey Simmons. He's had a really good couple of weeks.
Yeah. And he had a sack as well. And you just start to see, more plays on the opposing team side of the line of scrimmage, right? And that's something Landry got in there too. I think if they could really get this pass rush going and being more consistent, the pass defense we know is solid. I'm not going to say, obviously number-wise, right? They're the top pass defense in the league, just if you bank it off of yards allowed. I don't know that overall they are, but the pass rush could help make it even better and help develop more turnovers, and that's something that this defense needs to get more of. I think they could be pretty good. But I want to talk about Kenneth Murray Jr. And for me, I just continue to look at his ability to find the football as a gift and a curse, because there are a lot of times where he probably shouldn't be in the play. He's in the play and he's around the football. So, oh, hey, look, he's near the football, was completed. Let's ding him for completion allowed or touchdown allowed.
Right.
But then if you go beneath the surface and you talk to the coaches or you talk to some of the other players, and they'll tell you, hey, that one wasn't on Kenneth Murray. There are a couple that where that was the case. So I will say they decided to flip. They took him from weak side backer to Mike, and they put Jerome Baker at weak side. So now he's the guy with a lot of coverage responsibilities and those types of things, which I think is more in his wheelhouse than Kenneth Murray's. And lo and behold, Murray turns in his best game as a Titan.
He's a player. Signing the Titans made this offseason. Again, I want to say relative to expectations, because obviously Calvin Ridley's had a great season over the last month and a half. But when Kenneth Murray got signed, and I've said it before, when Kenneth Murray got signed, not a lot of people were excited about it. Yeah, people were saying he was kind of a bust in LA. Why would you sign this guy? He has been a legit inside linebacker for this team, and he makes play after play after play.
It's just really, the more freely you allow him to play, the better. Like, he's like that dog that you put him in the backyard and just say, okay, go ahead, just run around. Let him run around. you know, like the dog's in the house all day and he just he can't.
Yeah, bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, he's just going crazy. And you just let him outside and he just is just having a great time. And I think that's how Kenneth Murray Jr. is. He is one of those guys. You gotta just let him play. You let him play. That's what Oklahoma did. Didn't require him to think too much. That's why he didn't. And I'm not saying he's dumb. Let's make this straight. I'm not saying he's dumb, but he's one of those ones where you don't want to slow down what he does. You want to allow it to just be at the high octane speed that it goes at. Just let him just see it and go get it.
Right. We talked about Will Levis, the paralysis by analysis kind of stuff. It's the same thing with Kenneth Murray. It's like you want him to just see ball, hit ball. And as we've seen more of that, I mean, he's made plays all year long, but definitely a great game on Sunday against Houston. Also, have to shout out Jarvis Brownlee Jr., his first career interception. And although L'Jarius Sneed is on injured reserve now, it looks like Chidobe Awuzie is going to come back. So some more aid coming to the Titans secondary. And Amani Hooker should be back after missing Sunday's game with an illness. So should see a more full-strength Titans secondary moving forward. And they will play the Washington Commanders on Sunday, facing off against rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. And obviously he's had a great season, well in the conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But does it feel, TD, like the Titans are catching them at the right time, where they were hot to start the season, but now have kind of hit a little bit of a dip as we get towards December?
Yeah, it's a prime time to catch them, and we know the Cliff Kingsbury drop-off that happens at certain – I think it was as of 2 weeks ago. That's when it normally happens. So that's something to take note of. But you still got to be very careful with Jayden Daniels, what he could do with Terry McLaurin. Now, they'll be without Austin Eckler. You'll probably see former Titan Jeremy McNichols getting some burn. So you do have that. But this is one of those weeks where you don't have a whole lot to be concerned about on offense as far as weapons are concerned. Zach Ertz, still a solid player. But I think they are catching them at a good time, in that this is an opportunity to really try to mix things up against a young quarterback, right? You know, there's a lot going on because of him having this, I don't want to say cold streak, but this downward trend from the start. So he's going to be pressing, trying to make plays. You could make that into a turnover.
Yeah, things haven't come quite as easy for Jayden Daniels over the last couple of weeks. Titans will try and capitalize on that on Sunday. Our producer today, Brandon Aldrich, is a big Commanders fan. So I know he's listening to this, hoping that his Washington team is going to be able to pull off a win at home on Sunday. We'll see. I think it's going to be a good game, and we'll talk about it a little bit in the next segment of, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because I don't think there's really a chance for the Titans to get back into a playoff position. You'd have to win out, and it's hard to win. What would it be, 7 games in a row in the NFL? But if you win this game, you got the Jaguars coming up. The Bengals haven't played great this year. Like, the rest of the games feel gettable from here. You're not going to win them all, but we could see last week's game against the Texans be a turning point if you're able to stack a win on top of it on Sunday, which has not been easy for the Titans. I heard this week on the radio, and TD, this made me sad. The Titans have not won back-to-back games in over 2 calendar years. I believe the date was like October of 2022. I moved here the last week of October of 2022, and I realized that since I've lived here, the Titans have not won back-to-back games. Yeah. And little bit depressing to hear that.
That's what I was going to say next, because before we talk about an actual win streak, a 7-game one at that,
you got to win back-to-back games.
Put 2 together first, and then we could kind of think of it.
Yeah, I don't want anybody out there to think that I'm saying the Titans are going to get to 9-8. We got text this morning saying the Titans are going to win out. I don't think that, but I think there is a chance. And TD, I think it was 2 weeks ago we had this conversation of 2 years ago the Lions were out of the playoff picture. Similar spot where the Titans were, and they won 6 of their last 7 games. Knocked the Packers out of playoff contention in week 17, and then carried that momentum over into a 12-win season last year. Titans could take that momentum, show that they're on the right trajectory, and carry that into next year.
Here's the deal. I know fans want the draft pick. I know they want to lose games and those types of things. But there's something that is said to the ability to build a winning culture, to build an expectation of winning. That Lions team is a great example of that. They down the stretch. That's what they had to play for, building culture.
Dan Campbell was going to get fired.
Right. And so they managed to find a way to turn things around. And then they put a block that you could step on, or it's almost like a trampoline, right? You jump on the trampoline and it springs you forward to the following year. And look, they made it to the playoffs. They were a competitive team. I'm not saying the Titans are going to take the same path, but it is still good to win games, even though it costs you a top 10 draft pick, because there's something that has to be said to building culture of winning in the building.
And the Titans still might end up in the top 10. Even if they went 3-3 the rest of the way, 6-11. That's what they went last year. They picked 7th.
Here's the thing. If you do end up out of the top 10, there's still Luther Burden.
Yeah.
Third will probably not be a top 10 pick. I don't know if James Pierce is going to be a top 10 pick.
Yep.
Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina may not be a top 10 pick.
Lots of good players.
Abdul Carter probably will, but you're going to have a chance to still get some good players.
And honestly, for Titans fans out there wanting to tank at this point, after the win on Sunday, I just don't see a path to the Titans having a top 3 pick in this draft. There are too many bad teams. The Giants are going to be awful the rest of the season. The Jaguars look like they're not going to be all that competitive the rest of the year.
We saw the Raiders today.
Right. You play the Jaguars twice, which you would expect to split at worst in that. That gets you to 4 wins. I don't think 4 wins is going to get you in the top 3 this year. So I don't think the Titans are going to be at the very top of the draft. I think no matter what you do, unless you do go on a giant winning streak and win out, you're probably going to be in the 8-12 range. Mm-hmm. So you might as well win some games and get your team feeling good heading into the offseason. We'll see if they can stack together 2 wins for, again, the first time in over 2 years on Sunday, taking on the Commanders. We'll continue to preview that game in our final segment. And again, also look ahead at a big game in Nashville tomorrow, 11 a.m. kick, Vanderbilt and Tennessee in a rivalry matchup over at First Bank Stadium. Jake and TD, presented by Soul Nashville, here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.
fireball.
Final segment here on Black Friday. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport, Jake and TD, presented by Soul Restaurants Nashville here on 102.5 and 106.3. The Game, getting you set for your football weekend. The MTSU Blue Raiders are going to be playing at Pitbull Stadium tomorrow afternoon, taking on Florida International. Just heard from Chase and Big Joe down there in Miami. We're looking ahead to the Titans and Commanders on Sunday. Adam in Portland on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. He says there's a very good chance the Titans can go on a 4 or 5 game win streak here and have meaningful games at the end of the season. But he says not because the Titans are good, because the AFC South as a whole is as bad as he's ever seen it. I don't know about that, Adam. There have been some pretty bad years in the AFC South over the last 10 seasons or so.
But, I mean, to his point, so I think you look at this game at Washington, that's very winnable. Jaguars here is winnable. Now, that Bengals game, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and the crew, they're going to make a late run.
Oh, yeah.
That one's going to be interesting. But, at Indianapolis, at Jacksonville, the Texans here, those, I think, 2 out of the final 6 games are pretty winnable, to be honest with you. So, to his point, I don't know about maybe not a 4-game win streak or something like that, but they could put together 4 wins out of these last, and that would be fabulous for this.
100%. If they can get to, I guess that would get you to 7-10. If you can win 4 out of your last 6, that puts you in a good spot moving forward to next year. And you're still going to have a high-ish draft pick. I mean, you went 7-10 2 years ago. You picked 11th and took Peter Skoronski. So you could get, you mentioned some names there. Luther Burden would be a great one. I mean, a guy who was expected to be a top 5 pick. James Pierce was getting projected as the number 1 overall pick entering the season. So guys with plenty of talent will be there in the late single-digit picks and into the early teens. Quickly before we get out of here, Titans and Commanders. TD, what do you think is going to be key for Tennessee on the road trying to get back-to-back wins to finally break the streak of not being able to win back-to-back games?
I'm going to tell you, and the line on this one, by the way, it's Commanders 5.5. That's what they're giving the Titans. But I think you look at the Drake May game, you look at Darnold too, these guys, you look at Malik Willis, the common theme is quarterbacks able to elude the pressure and make plays down the field, passing it, or running for Drake May had almost 100 yards against.
Yeah.
They have to make sure that Randall Cunningham 2.0, Jaden Daniels is contained. You got to be very disciplined with your rushing lanes. You have to make sure that you're shutting the door on that ability of him to step up and move and find that lane. You got to make sure that you're not going too far beyond the quarterback. It all has to be a coordinated, contained, calculated pass rush. That's what you have to do, because this guy can scramble and attack the line of scrimmage, throw the ball down the field. Look, Jarvis Brownlee, as good as he is, he's not going to cover for 4 or 5 seconds. You can't ask him to do that. So those are the things that you have to do. If they're able to do that, I think they have a really good chance. You got to try to frustrate the rookie and get him into pressing and making a throw that he has no business making, getting that turnover, or trying to make something happen within the pocket and maneuver a little bit more, and Simmons or somebody come behind and swipe it up.
Titans trying to carry their momentum from a big win in Houston over to Washington, back-to-back road games for Tennessee. Speaking of your nicknames for young quarterbacks, Juan Elway, Diego Pavia, and the Vanderbilt Commodores hosting Tennessee tomorrow, 11 a.m. kickoff on West End. This one is going to be fun.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a lot of Vandy fans going out there, a lot of Tennessee fans. And for Tennessee, this is winning you're in. You're in the college football playoff if you win. And I know Vanderbilt would want nothing more than to spoil that tomorrow morning and get their 7th win of the season.
Yeah, you definitely know. And they'll be up for it. And that's the thing, Juan Elway, that guy is – If I'm a GM, like I'm getting him, and I'm not getting him to be my quarterback of the field. I'm getting him to be my guy. Like, hey, we need a spark, get in there, or my guy to just have on the roster, as to give the show team, as a part of the show team. But nevertheless, long story short, I love the energy that he brings. I love the way he uplifts everybody else on the team. And that they're going to be up for this. And this is a game that they're going to compete in. If they don't win, they're still going to be competitive.
We talked about it earlier today. If if Vandy wins tomorrow, I think you'd have a hard time convincing any Vanderbilt fan that this isn't the greatest season in their program's history. Maybe not number of wins wise. I know James Franklin had more than 7 wins, at least
quality
once.
of it.
But you beat the number 1 team in the country on your home field, and then you knock your rival out of the playoff at the end of the year. I don't think it would get much better than that. Vandy could have gone 2-10 and not made a bowl game, and I think it still would have been up there if those were their 2 wins.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And those wins, if they compare it with that win over Tennessee, like that would be huge for this program. It would be huge for the fans. We'll see. I mean, I don't have a fighting dog in it, so I just want to see good football. And hey, I mean, I wish that we weren't on the road because I would love to go see Pierce in person.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a early game tomorrow, 11 a.m. kick, 9:30 a.m. coverage starts here on 102.5 The Game. You heading out to Washington tomorrow?
Yeah,
Well,
so I'm flying to Philly. My granddaughter, little Dakota, her first birthday party is tomorrow. So I'm flying to Philly. I'm gonna go to that. And the DMV, the luxury of, so I'm just gonna take the train to DC. I'm staying in Virginia. The game's in Maryland, so it's all good.
Just take the metro in.
I'm gonna go ahead and Uber.
Okay.
You know what I
mean?
Yeah. But I'm gonna take
far.
the train into down into by Reagan Airport. And
gotcha.
Yeah.
Love it. Should be fun. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, TD.
Yeah, thank you. Hope you did as well. I ate a lot.
Yeah.
Had some leftovers before this show, so I'm surprised. I had to thug it out, like wake up, because
get out of the food coma.
Yeah, man, it'll knock you down.
Titans and Commanders coming up on Sunday, noon kick at Northwest Stadium. I'm still getting used to, it's been FedEx Field my entire life, but Northwest Stadium up there in Landover, Maryland. Titans trying to stack back-to-back wins. And again, tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Make sure you tune in for Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Coverage starts at 9:30. Force Company will be with you from 9 to 9:30, getting you ready for that game as well. For Teron Davenport, Brandon Aldrich, our producer today, I'm Jake Lyman, signing off. We'll be back with you same time, same place, 6 to 7 next Friday evening here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.